And now, AM 650 presents your source for leading-edge news and information on today's hottest products and services. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Well, hello and welcome to Experts on Call. Stirling Faux with you in studio, joined by Tony Gioventu, the Executive Director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia. Tony, hello. Nice to see you again.
Hey, it's good to see you again for this show.
And we have a guest in studio that you have invited to join us. So would you please introduce Larry to our audience this evening?
We have Larry Buttress with us, who is the Deputy Executive Officer of the Real Estate Council of British Columbia.
Welcome, Larry. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Appreciate
coming
that,
in. It's
my pleasure.
This is great. We're early in the year. It's an education moment or two for all of us, including myself. So why don't you just start by giving us give us the elevator review of what the Real Estate Council of British Columbia does, Larry, and what you do as its Deputy Executive Officer.
Certainly. The Real Estate Council is it's a self-regulated agency. We provide consumer protection services to the public who use real estate licensees. So when I say real estate licensees, I'm talking about people who provide trading services, rental property management services, and strata management services.
Okay.
So we license, educate, and discipline those people. And the parameters for that mandate are contained within the Real Estate Services Act.
Okay, so for the real estate community, you are something like the College of Physicians would be for the medical community.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, now you've mentioned three separate categories, Larry. The trading sector, that's the real estate agents who assist in the buying and selling of properties.
Right, and leasing, yes.
Okay, and then the next category is rental property management.
Yeah, and that would be the management of the assets owned by a landlord. So you're talking about multifamily residential or single-family units that are being rented out by an owner.
Oh, I see. For example, if I don't want to sell my home, I want to hang on to it, but I don't want to live there anymore, so I need someone to occupy it, pay the mortgage, and maybe even put a few bucks in my bank account, I would retain a property management company because I don't want to do all that work. They would take what? Do they take a percentage of whatever I get in rent? Is that how that works?
Typically they do, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And is that a fixed thing by law, or is that negotiable?
No, it's totally negotiable. And that's going to depend on the level of services and probably the size of your portfolio and a number of other factors, but always a matter of negotiation between the owner and the brokerage.
All right. And the third category, Larry, is strata management. And
right.
Again, a separate... how long, for example, have people involved in managing strata complexes been required to be licensed?
Since January 1st of 2006.
And it was kind of Wild West show before then?
Well, I don't want to say that. I mean, it's a mature industry, but it was an industry that was not regulated by a group such as ourselves.
Oh, I was being a bit facetious, but nonetheless, clearly, these sorts of requirements for regulation come as a result of a reason. Government doesn't just do this because they can. There must have been some motivating factor for the legislation to come about.
There's probably a number of factors, Stirling. Certainly our body, the Real Estate Council of British Columbia, had been suggesting to government that there ought to be some regulation of these people, whether it was through us or some other agency. But I think probably the point in time when things may have changed was probably the Barrett Commission study and report that, as some of your listeners may remember, was related to the leaky condo syndrome.
Oh, boy.
And so, there was...
Hard to forget that particular round
and
now,
it's,
isn't
it's
it?
still going on for a lot of people.
Sure it is, yes.
So, there was a lot of things that were spawned from that. One was the creation of the Homeowner Protection Office. The second thing that was spawned, not totally, but at least partially as a result of that, was the licensing of strata managers.
Now, Tony, I was going to ask you about this, just watching, because you're watch Larry, and you've been around with the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia for quite some time. You've been studying and participating in this industry for a long time. Do you notice a difference since Larry's Real Estate Council has been brought on board to regulate strata management companies than before they were regulated? Has that changed the way they do business or the industry at all, from your perspective?
Well, I think we have to look back as far as the late 1960s, because we have strata management services, either as on-site or as collective companies, that were managing stratas as far as the late 60s to present day, once we started building strata properties in the province. And we certainly saw some extreme standards and some variables and practices that were not necessarily in the best interest of consumers. So what first part is what we've seen is January 1st 2006, when licensing came, was really the beginning of the future. It was not where we didn't throw a switch to suddenly say all of a sudden, hey, look, everybody's licensed and now we're going to have a standard of an industry that's going to perform to 100% capacity.
Right.
We were having to, and we still are, and we will be for probably the next 10 to 20 years on a continual basis. We're re-educating and reclassifying how people are managing properties such as strata corporations as a result of the licensing. We had a very large, and we do now, we have a fairly large management base of individuals, many of whom actually worked prior to the legislation coming into effect. So, at the same time of continuing to manage properties, the industry is having to change, re-educate, redesign, license, and reassess how they're essentially doing services for the stratas. So, I'm kind of sounding like a politician, so I'm going to sidestep that comment and answer your question of, is it better than it was prior to licensing? I would say absolutely. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably a 10 compared to where we were in 2000. But the scale really should be on a scale of 1 to 25.
Okay.
Right? And we still have some big steps to go. We have some big steps to go on mandatory education. We have big steps to go on some basic standards of operations and procedures. But one of the difficulties that's associated with this industry is the industry itself has specific regulations around financial management and financial performance and reporting, and their standards of care and their duty to their clients. So, the manager's duty to the strata corporations in following instructions. But outside of that, much is left to be contractually created and designed between the strata corporations and the strata managers. So you have a twofold problem. You have the strata corporation who is entering into a contract, who may or may not be clear about what they're getting out of their contract. And then the other thing we have the strata corporations, the strata councils, forgetting they are in fact, for all intents purposes, they are in fact the supervisors of that contract, and the enforcement and the application of that contract. So, so really we're redesigning the entire culture of this industry. It's interesting because if you add the licensing of strata managers, add the mandatory warranty programs that were instituted now with new buildings under the Homeowner Protection Act, and add depreciation reports coming into effect, that's an entire cultural shift in our industry with respects to strata ownership, strata buying and selling, and of course with respects to strata management. We've gone through massive sweeping changes in about a 10-year window with all of these issues, and we are certainly starting to see the benefits. Not without issues in the industry, not without problems, but they're far fewer, and the results and the responses are far greater.
Well, it was interesting because Larry Buttress, Deputy Executive Director or Officer of the Real Estate Council of BC, you've already said this is a mature industry. We didn't come in and start something brand new. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We're trying to modify the industry, improve the industry. So how's it going?
Well, I share Tony's view and optimism. I think that we've made some real inroads. I think that there is a higher level of basic understanding of the obligations that a strata manager has. I think that one of the key things that we did when we first became involved in the licensing of strata managers was we required those strata managers to retain the funds that they hold on behalf of each strata corporation in separate trust accounts.
One would think so, but obviously that wasn't necessarily the practice in the past.
There was no regulation, and
Wow.
so there was nobody saying what you could or could not do. So that was one of the key factors that we did. Tied with that, we said that if a strata management brokerage is going to retain funds that are intended for contingency reserves or now most recently strata fees, that those funds must be held in a separate trust account from what we would normally call the operating account of the strata corporation.
So even within each individual client, there are subcategories that need to be compartmentalized.
And the rationale for that, Stirling, is so that not only can the strata corporation client receive a copy of the bank statements that are with respect to their own funds, but also so that when we require strata management brokerage to reconcile those accounts and make sure that the ins and outs of the money are properly accounted for, that a copy of that reconciliation is provided to the strata corporation. And so a third element of that is that we require that there be at least two signing officers on each contingency reserve or strata, special levy account. And in our view, that increases the level of protection, meaning that one person in and of themselves or by themselves is not able to totally control the flow of funds.
The double check system, right?
Double check system, yeah. Or double signing officer, not necessarily double check, yeah.
Okay, well, again, all the sorts of elementary, basic business practices that one would assume an industry that, particularly, I mean, you're talking property management, strata management companies, some of the budgets that these people hold for major complexes and big buildings and contingency funds run easily into 7 figures, Larry.
Absolutely. When we first began the licensing process, we asked all of the brokerages who were intending, I call them brokerages because that's a licensed term, but the companies who wish to become licensed as strata management brokerages.
Okay.
We required them to provide us with information about, how many corporations are you managing? What's the typical amount of money that you're receiving on a monthly basis? What's the typical amount of money that you're holding on behalf of your clients? And, into that process, we learned that there was, at that point in time, well over $500 million that was being held by strata management brokerages.
In British Columbia.
In British Columbia.
Fantastic.
And that would not surprise me at all if that number wasn't much higher than that today, and with the depreciation reports and probably some of the benefits that will bring where strata corporations are in fact going to begin to fund properly the types of maintenance and repairs that they can look forward to seeing in the future, we're probably going to see that amount increase. And so there is a lot of public money that we want to try and make sure is protected.
How can the Real Estate Council of British Columbia, Larry, best help a seller and a buyer in a strata environment? Now, we're talking about property and strata management, but then let's go back to the trade side, if you will. And Tony just keeps revealing more and more details about living in stratas and condo life and all of the paperwork and all of the pitfalls and all of the, it's just home ownership. It might be a different type of home, but if you're going to become a homeowner, you need to do a lot of homework, and Tony keeps reminding us of that. How can the Real Estate Council of BC assist buyers and sellers best?
Well, remembering that we deal with the real estate licensees, we provide consumer protection, but we don't have a direct conduit with the consumers themselves in terms of that protection. But having said that, one of the things that we try to do is to advise real estate licensees who are involved in the purchase and sale of strata lots in particular, that there's a wealth of information that should be available being held by the strata corporations with respect to the history of that strata corporation. So we would certainly encourage any buyer of a strata lot to access that information, whether it's the minutes of meetings of the strata corporation, the financial statements of the strata corporation, any copies of important documents, bylaws, rules, all of that type of information that is really going to be revealing to what it is that buyer might be purchasing.
And these are the key details, Tony, that you keep insisting on. If you cannot buy into a condo or strata lifestyle without checking this list off, A, B, C, C, and down the list you go. And this is what Larry's talking about, all of these super important pieces of information without which you're not making an informed decision and essentially asking for trouble.
Well, then there can be quite a lot of mystery around what you're actually purchasing and what you're exposed to with respect to liability. So, I think buyers and sellers who use their agents to procure information for them. I think it's one of the most valuable resources that you can use. Get your agent on the ground working for you to get copies of all of the records that you would like to see, copies of the minutes of meetings and the financials, certainly, copies of bank statements, copies of tax returns, a copy of the depreciation report, copies of the recent insurance documents, and get your agent to sit down with you as you go through these documents. I think it's helpful for you to understand all these documents are available, and this is a great service that can be provided with respect to the procurement of these documents.
Interesting stuff. When we come back from our break, we're going to talk about those agents and how exactly tuned up they are to be of maximum assistance to you. Our special guest tonight is Larry Buttress, the Deputy Executive Officer of the Real Estate Council of BC, and we'll tell you about their terrific website a little later too. Tony Gioventu is Executive Director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of BC, another outfit with a fantastic website. I'm Stirling Faux, and we'll be right back.
There's still more ahead with Experts on Call, the show focused on delivering relevant and beneficial consumer information. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.